Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. I've got Mando Season 3 reviewed every episode. I have a whole pile of Star Wars content, various things, Darth Vader, what Disney's done to Luke, all these different videos. Plus, I have my sequels reimagined, so feel free to check those out, like and subscribe if you like the content. And let's get into this. So, this review or end cap on this season will have a bit of a more serious tone. I like to joke around. I like to, because it's just so silly. They've made it so ridiculously hilarious that I kind of just laugh the whole time I watch these episodes. And then when I'm doing my reviews, I'm remembering back and just laughing all the time because it's just so silly. But I did kind of want to take a little bit of a more serious tone just in terms of where the direction that they took this and the reason they took it in this direction. But while I am talking, I am going to feature the absolute cringe screenshots from various episodes of this season to remind you of how hilariously bad this season was. So I'm not going to go through every dumb detail about this season. If you want that, I have reviews for every episode. I go through every hilarious detail that happened in this show and all the cringe and the silliness and the pterodactyls and everything else. What I want to do is comment on this season's main problem. Now, I was never super into the first two seasons of this show. They weren't terrible by any means, but they weren't good either. But there was a clear story arc. But the problem is there was a heavy dose of filler episodes. And sorry if you might potentially hear kids yelling and screaming and they're running around with their friends in the backyard, and it might be picking up a bit of that, and I apologize if that's the case. But there's a clear story arc. Like I said, there's something there, and the main arc was sound. Mando is a bounty hunter, and he gets a bounty on a child, which I would assume is not the norm if you're a bounty hunter, and then he senses something just isn't right about it, and with the doctor and what they'd be doing with this kid, so he protects the child, and eventually figures out that the child needs to be with a Jedi because he is a Force user. And then he gets informed how to do that by Ahsoka and how to, finish this story arc, right? And so he eventually succeeds, and Grogu is reunited with the Jedi, Luke Skywalker. And we can argue about the details of how all that transpired because there's a lot of stupid stuff in those first two seasons as well. But the basic story arc was satisfactory. That's a good story. But it was accomplished. It was done. It had the good ending with Luke and stuff, and taking Grogu, and you felt good. You're like, yay, this poor little Jedi guy, he's going to go back with the Jedi. He's way too powerful. It makes no sense. He's the most powerful Force user ever. He doesn't even need training, but at least he's safe in the hands of our wonderful character that we all love, Luke Skywalker. So it was done. And what I think happened is someone at Lucasfilm said, well, hold on, we sell lots of merch because of Grogu. We sell lots of toys and stuff, and so we can't simply just let him go. But rather than write a new show about him and Luke, and the interesting things that could have been done there, they decided to keep him in the Mando show. And I don't know if that's because they thought without Grogu, Mando wouldn't get any ratings. I would argue no. I think the vast majority of people when The Mandalorian first came out were perfectly fine, and it wasn't Grogu. And actually, people were expecting a show about a bounty hunter, and I don't think you needed Grogu to accomplish that. And you could continue his story if you did want to do more seasons of The Mandalorian. But if you were that hung up about Grogu has to be in a show, well, then just say The Mandalorian's done. Maybe have him cameo in other shows or something like that, or come see Grogu or something with Luke. That's fine. Or even have him and Luke do some stuff together in another show where Luke is with Grogu, so you could still have your Grogu. But for some reason, they just had to have him in The Mandalorian again, and so this wasn't a decision based on storytelling or anything like that. It was a decision based on money, right? It was a bad decision because, like I said, they still could have made that money. They still could have had Grogu doing stuff. So I'm kind of perplexed why they would go this route. And I don't think it was positive. Anyway, to get him into season 3, how are they going to do this? So they decided the way to get Grogu back with Mando was to use a different show in the Book of Boba Fett, which is a whole other just what were you thinking? But again, it was to get Grogu into the Book of Boba Fett because he's their big seller, right? They have to have him in as many things as they possibly can because that's the big seller. And it's the same thing with Vader. They got to just constantly have Vader coming back into things, even though maybe it makes him look weaker, and he's not nearly the menacing force that he was in the OT, and he's just got to keep having him come in there, keep having his helmet cut in half, got more, Vader. He sells, another toy. And so they had to use a different show, and they did it in the Book of Boba Fett, and they had to have Luke contradict his realization that sometimes attachments are a good thing, and being a Jedi and loving somebody and loving them enough to protect them is actually a good thing. And that was what was so great about, I think, in a lot of ways, when George wrote the prequel trilogy, he overemphasized, in my view, but he emphasized the no attachment rule in many ways to make Luke's realization that much stronger at the end of the 6th episode, where he throws his lightsaber, he says, "That's it, I'm not fighting my dad, this is insane. I love him, I'm not doing that. You're a nut job, Palpatine." And so George making the order of the Jedi, when they had some control over the galaxy and some say, overly order oriented. And so they basically had to sacrifice Luke's arc, essentially, like the whole point of him and his Jedi journey, on the altar of money and getting Grogu back into this show. And that's a really bad thing to do. So right then and there, you're starting from a pretty crappy place for a lot of fans. Like you're already starting off Mandalorian season 3 with people going, "Man, like, I don't really like that," you know, and there's lots of people that got over it, but nobody really likes that Luke made Grogu choose between hanging out with his dad or getting trained, when we know the real Luke would have just been like, "Hey, you can, stay and train, Mando, you want to hang out too, that's cool, whatever, come for visits or whatever you want to do, this is great, be with your family." But they didn't do that, and again, it's strange, the decision making that this company has been doing. Luke was the highlight of The Mandalorian for a reason, but they couldn't help but besmirch his character in order to fulfill their desire for more Grogu. And again, as I said earlier, I don't know why they went this route. There were other options they could have went, but for some reason they go these weird directions. It's just a lack of realization of what good storytelling is. And when you get that kind of an emotional response from people seeing Luke Skywalker, and we're talking like take, for example, Star Wars Theory. He's a very influential fan, because he's going to drive customers to you as Disney Lucasfilm. He's promoting you, and he's crying his eyes out like a little girl, and he loved it. He loved seeing Luke, and so you don't want to hurt that, right? That's the story you told that was enjoyed by people. So you don't want to piss on that. But for some reason they just make these decisions, and I can't fathom who or why or what they're thinking. Like, who is doing this? And then imagine the Mandalorians and their story in season 3. This story could have been okay without Grogu, right? The idea of the Mandalorians coming together and going back to Mandalore and finding new leadership and having some challenges along the way, could have been, a half reasonable story. And, you got the Mandalorian who is a Mandalorian, and he could be a huge part of that. And that would tie in quite nicely. But now, of course, I'm saying in premise only, of course, basic premise. The execution was littered with nonsense in season 3 that towers over the nonsense from the previous 2 seasons. But alas, the premise still could have worked. I personally would have just preferred if the Mandalorian was a bounty hunter, but, that's fine. You could make that work. But they decided to involve Grogu anyway. And the question then becomes, was he necessary? Well, no. And if anything, he removed all the tension, because we all knew, because we had seen it. We had seen it in Boba Fett, and we had seen it in previous seasons of Mando, that he would just stick out his hand at some point and all would be well. So, that's what he does. Anyone gets in trouble, and oh no, but no, he sticks his hands out, it's over. And it's just, it takes away all the tension. So the basic arc of the whole Mandalorian thing could have been cool, but and it wasn't because the execution was bad. But even if the execution was good, with Grogu there, there's no tension. There's nothing really to worry about, and so it's hard to get into it. It's hard to get really excited, about, oh no, what's going to happen? Gideon was never a threat to me because I knew at some point Grogu was just going to use the Force. The Praetorian Guards were never a threat to me because I knew at some point Grogu was just going to use the Force. And it's not like you're like, oh, he's Luke having to face his father, or he's, Anakin having to face Dooku or something like that. He's the most powerful Force user in the history of Star Wars. There's nothing to worry about. No one can do anything to him. So you knew that at some point, he was going to save the day, and so none of it really mattered. So season 3 also made Grogu's storyline in the first 2 seasons kind of dumb too, if you think about it, because are we to presume that Gideon's fully grown clones happened in only 2 years? Favreau claims that there were 2 years between season 2 and season 3. And we knew that he had Grogu for a period of time. And so did he take Grogu's blood and that's how he made the clones? So he made them in literally 2 years? That sounds kind of dumb. And we know from the prequel trilogy that Kaminoans, or whatever, those skinny dudes with the small heads or whatever, Camoans, they sped up the aging process for the clones, for the Clone Wars, and they were the experts in cloning, the experts in the galaxy in cloning. And the fastest they could produce a fully grown clone was 10 years. So unless I'm going to say that Grogu's blood is responsible for Gideon's fully grown clones, then that just means Gideon's some sort of clone genius. Well, what? And so then I say, okay, well then it couldn't have been Grogu's blood that did it. It had to have been, he had to already have known how to do this, and he's been growing these clones for a really long time. And that makes Grogu's storyline basically pointless in the first 2 seasons. What was Mando saving him from? They already had the technology. They were already doing this. He was making forced clones before Grogu even came along. Unless, again, he's some sort of mega genius that was able to do it in 2 years, something the Camoans, who were the absolute galaxy experts, could never do. And let's face it, 2 years, that sounds ridiculous. Like, that sounds really stupid. Can you imagine that? You've got a 60-year-old Gideon clone in 2 years. That's the other thing. Why did he make him at 60? Like, that's just, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you make like a younger version of yourself? Anyways, I don't want to get into the details. I have my reviews of each episode. Excuse me. They've rendered Grogu's arc in the first 2 seasons pointless, and the first 2 seasons, the whole thing was Mando saving him and getting him to a Jedi. So they've made Mando's arc in the first 2 seasons also pointless. Everything they did sacrificed on the altar of having Grogu in season 3 to sell plush toys. That's literally what they did. And what a stupid mistake that is. That's just bad. That's bad business. That's bad writing. That's dumb. The whole thing is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. And this is the type of people that are running this company. These are not smart people. These are not smart people. These are people that are there because their friends hired them. It's nepotism at its finest. And I've been around this where people have jobs they shouldn't have because of their dad or their whoever runs the company, and they're crappy at their jobs, but they get to keep them because they're friends of theirs or relatives of theirs. That is not how you run a successful company. And the level of talent and the level of knowledge of Star Wars and the lore and the level of competency is really secondary to just, I'm helping out my friend. And so they're using Star Wars as like this sandbox to invite their friends in. And then we wonder why they make these really, really weird, dumb decisions that actually are hurting them business-wise. It's just really stupid. And of course, this whole Grogu thing and the cloning and everything with Gideon is one of those things that just, it's really dumb. And then there's this vast chasm between the excitement in the season 2 finale of having Luke Skywalker come in and save everybody. And you compare that and the excitement and the emotion and the people crying, like I said earlier, and all that stuff to the rushed and strange Gideon tie-in to the Mandalorians getting back Mandalore. Like, think about that. So it was the last couple episodes. It was quite rushed at the end. They had to find a way to tie in Gideon because Gideon was the guy responsible for the whole Grogu abduction, but that doesn't matter anyway. And then, so he had to be on Mandalore, and then, you know, and then they had the Mythosaur sitting down there. You know, why wouldn't you have just had them retake Mandalore and have to deal with the Mythosaur and sort of bring that legend back to life, even though I think that's kind of silly, but you could have done that. You didn't have to have this Gideon tie-in, but they did it anyway. And the ending of season 3, in comparison to the ending of season 2, is atrocious. At least in terms of, even if you think it's good, like even if you think the scenes were good, the writing was good, the emotion that you felt, and I would implore any of the people, my reply guys on Twitter and people that don't like my takes and are very much fans of this show and of what Disney's doing with Star Wars, I would think even you guys would admit that this season finale is if season 2 season finale in your view is a 10 out of 10, this is like a 2. The ending of season 2 is where this show needed to end. That's where it needed to end. And like I said, you can still write another show and have Grogu in it. You can still sell your Grogu plushies. And the Mandalorians having their story arc, it really had very little to do with Mando or Grogu, really, at all. If you think about it, you think about the finale, the Mandalorians could have went into and did what they did. They could have gotten away the same way that they did, right? Grogu and Mando aren't there, right? Imagine they're not there. What happens? Literally the exact same thing happens. The exact same thing happens. What changes? The only thing that maybe changes is maybe Bo-Katan dies when the ship crashes down because she doesn't have Grogu to stick his hand out, but you could have easily written some other way for her to escape and Gideon get crushed by the ship. Literally, they wrote a season called The Mandalorian with Grogu and Mando, and neither of them needed to be in it for them to fulfill the basic plot that they were trying to fulfill. So what was the purpose? What was the purpose of this? And again, if you want to sell plush toys, you can still sell plush toys. Put them in something else. This was insane. This is nonsense. What are these people doing? They're idiots. They don't make any sense. So is anyone excited for the next season? Like, of them going on journeys now? And, I mean, we've seen Adventures in Babysitting for 3 seasons. I want to see the Mandalorian bounty hunt. That's what he's supposed to be. Now we're back to Adventures in Babysitting. All this to say, the Grogu-Mando story was already fulfilled, but will now continue ad nauseum for the foreseeable future until the money dries up. It's all about money. And there's nothing wrong with making money. But there needs to be a balance between making money and good storytelling, because if you only focus on the money and the storytelling goes away, which it has now, then you're left with neither. You're left with no interest. And I've been watching some reviews from people on YouTube and stuff that are pretty big fans of The Mandalorian, and they loved the first 2 seasons. And they were still hanging on. It was kind of like when I was watching Game of Thrones. I literally was there until pretty much the last episode. I was still hanging on to hope. Like, there was a couple really stupid things that happened in the couple episodes before that, but I was still hanging on. And a lot of these guys were still hanging on. But that finale, even those guys are like, what was the point of this? Like, this was, this ended up being dumb, and I don't really care that much anymore. And so you took this amazing show, you created a character that I think is stupid, but a lot of people loved in Grogu, and you've now taken something that was at a peak at the end of season 2, and you took way too long to do season 3, but you did season 3, and now you've brought it down, and the interest is now way down, and people are going to respond with their wallets anyway. So the whole reason you made your dumb decisions that you made is going to backfire on you. Now the latest is they're going to do a new Rey movie. And that's kind of what they're calling it, is Rey's new movie. Well, why can't it just be a new Star Wars movie? Because immediately now it's all about Rey. and Finn's going to be in it, but it's Rey's movie. Is anyone actually excited to see a Jedi who has no possible threat to them? Does anyone really want to see more Grogu? Please answer in the comment section. Do we really? I mean, he's cute, but do we really? There's no threat to him. Mando and Grogu are going to go on little adventures. Grogu's going to stick his hand out. Nothing bad will ever happen. No challenges. No tension. Rey is going to be a Jedi. If anyone threatens her or her not Luke's Jedi Order, she's so powerful it won't matter. In Disney canon, she healed Ben's mind from the dark side when she healed him. So if there is a threat, she'll just touch the guy or touch whoever it is. She's that powerful. She has any force ability at her disposal. So I'm not feeling tension. They have made humongous mistakes with this IP. Monstrous writing mistakes. And I know I do my stupid videos and I nitpick every little thing. But that's just because it's funny. And you gotta laugh a little in life. And don't take it so seriously. But on a serious note, they just continue to make mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. If Luke had been his normal self in The Last Jedi, none of the people that are like, oh, I really like what they did with Luke would have been mad about that. They would have liked it either way. So the percentage of people that would have liked it no matter what they did, or were going to like it no matter what they did. But you did alienate this other group of people over here. Like nobody was like, I hope Luke is a recluse loser, right? Again, so there's going to be people that are going to accept that, a percentage, but then you're automatically going to alienate the people that kind of wanted him to be the optimistic Luke that he always was. It's the same thing with Grogu. Grogu does not have to be with the Mandalorian to sell Grogu. People that think Grogu's a good character are going to think Grogu's a good character whether he's with Luke or with Mando or with somebody else. You didn't need to do this. It's like they go for that. They're aiming for like the absolute lowest common denominator. Like Mando season 3 now has alienated some of the Mando fans. Like I said, some of the people that were really into it are not so much anymore. So who are they making these things for? They are making this IP right now is geared towards people that are label worshipers, right? Anytime they see a Star Wars logo, even if it's absolute shite, they're gonna say it's great and they're gonna buy it. That's the group of people that they're making Star Wars for now. Is people that aren't gonna think critically, aren't gonna care. They're gonna see lightsabers and get excited and buy it. But the question is what percentage of Star Wars fans are those people? What percentage of Star Wars fans? How many people are in that camp? And we're slowly seeing with the declining ratings, the declined ratings for Andor, the declined ratings for Mando Season 3, the declined merchandise sales, the no one going to the hotel, right? All of those things are pointing to and then all the projects that the trial balloons that Kathleen Kennedy throws out, and then everyone's like, no, we don't really like that. And, oh no, we're not making it anymore. All of those things are pointing to the audience is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and all they're going to be left with, because they can't stop themselves from doing this, all they're going to be left with in a few years or whatever it is that tiny group, that 10% of Star Wars fans that no matter what you do, they're going to love it. There are those people, no matter what you do, they are never going to think critically. They're never going to care. They're just going to say it's great because it's Star Wars. Those people will always be there. But how many of those people out of what percentage of Star Wars fans in 1999 when The Phantom Menace came out are in that camp? Let's say 25. Let's say it's a big number. Let's say it's 25%. They can do anything that they want. They could have Luke come back from the dead as a Sith Force ghost and kill everybody, and they'd still be like, woo! That's eventually gonna dry up your money, and you're not gonna be able to afford to do anything. And that is the stupidest business strategy. And The Mandalorian season 3 is just another step in that direction. They had it going, and then they know they had it's they have like a masochist approach to this IP. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, I know a lot of people say, well, but Luke Skywalker killed it. And yes, that was a big one. That was a big strike, right? But it's still technically alive after that. It's still technically alive. It's still technically making some money. But it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's just, they're just going to keep going and going and going and going until there's nothing left except those dumb people that don't care what they do. And there's not that many of those people. And seeing these reviews of Mando Season 3 proves that. A lot of people are not super thrilled. They're just kind of meh. And apathy will eventually lead to no one cares anymore. And this is just piss poor business. That's my rant. Mando Season 3 was stupid. Feel free to go back and watch my reviews of each episode. They're not as long as this one. This one was a bit longer. I had a lot to say. I had a big rant. But they're funny. All the details in the show that are just so silly and dumb. We can laugh together and see how stupid it is. And like I said, check out any other Star Wars content, sequels reimagined. Please like and subscribe to my channel, guys, and have a good day.